Good morning. Let's do this. Let's get cracking. We have things to do, people to see, places to go. It's Tuesday morning, cliffcentral.com on the 13th of April, but it's Tuesday the 13th. So if you're one of those people who's worried about, what is it, triskaidekaphobia, you don't have to stress because the 13th of anything is fine if it's not on a Friday. All right? Dum, dum, dum. We're very happy this morning. Well, I am anyway. I think Sia is too. I'm going to judge by his face. I think Sia's happy too. Nina Hasty is with us this morning. Hey, Neens, what's happening?
Right. Hello, darlings. What's happening?
My dog, are you? I love that accent. That's when you have that. What's that character called that you do?
Mrs. Smythe.
Love her. I love her.
Any love her.
Yeah, how are you doing? What's going on? What, you don't like your headphones? Now we can't hear you at all.
Right? You muted yourself, Nina?
No, don't know what she's done. It was going so well, and then she decided she's going to mess with stuff. This is what always happens. No, now we can't hear you anymore. I'll tell you what, go out, come back in.
Yourself?
No.
Nope.
We can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
This is like talking to Mrs. Smythe, your grandmother. All right, now she's having a bit of a meltdown there. We'll give her a second while Nina figures shit out.
Love
Beautiful.
This.
Let me see if I can't do it on my side. Hang on. Can't unmute your guest. Your mic is not connected according to the controls here. Yeah, go out and come back in. All right, so there's a lot going on this morning. Got a huge number of things on the agenda that we want to get into, and we'll get into all of those in just a second. If you want to join in the conversation, you can do that by leaving your comments on the YouTube channel, which is, of course, live. And since we're talking about the YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's very important that you do this. Why? Well, so that we can keep track of these numbers. Like anyone else on YouTube, we're doing it because we can reach a much bigger audience, and we want to know who that audience is, so that when we have advertisers and clients, they know what the hell they're getting in it. Neens, you back?
I am back, gentlemen. Sorry about that. I kept going, please wait. We appreciate your call. Please wait. We appreciate your call. You are number one in the queue.
These early mornings are just not child's play.
Listen, I got to compliment you on something. I saw over the weekend in the wake of that really horrible story with Nelly and what happened with her in Cape Town, AKA's fiance. And I saw a long thread that you put up about mental health. And I know that it's something that everybody thinks they can talk about these days. And listen, there are, 1 in 3 people in the world who are affected by some kind of mental health issue.
Indeed.
But I thought the way that you did it was really, really beautifully put. You explained things very well. You brought in your own personal experiences, and you helped, I think, a lot of us to understand what might be going on. Not that we know enough about that particular case, because I don't know that any new details have come forward yet, except that she died in this horrible way and fell to her death from the 10th story or whatever it was. Just an awful, awful story. But I loved the way you did that, because instead of just turning it into a this is a terrible story situation, you might have helped some people to understand mental health, and also some people who are going through it to be understood. So you know what? Thanks for that.
There was a macabre irony to the whole thing, in that the very next day I had found out that I lost one of my close friends from school that I grew up with that passed away. The family haven't released details. There was a suspicion of suicide. So the whole of yesterday, I was completely unhinged. It actually was on the news. His name is Phumlani Pikoli. He's an author. And I actually have his book here. It's so funny. I'd pulled it out the day, like on Sunday, when I was going through that when I was explaining that depressive episode, and I'd pulled out his book The Fatuous State of Severity, which is this book. I'm sure you might be even familiar with him.
Is he by any chance related to Vusi Piccoli?
He's Vusi Piccoli's son.
Okay, all right. Yeah, sure. Nina, that's horrible. So this happened on Monday.
This the news broke on Monday, but it happened on Saturday. So it was so weird because I'd experienced such a low on Sunday morning. When did I tweet the thing? Was it on Sunday morning? Or on Saturday morning, whichever day it was.
I only saw it on Sunday night. I mean, there's so much that I want to unpack with you in that, because you said something about sleep, for example, that I thought was really, really useful and instructive. And we'll get into the detail in a second. But I mean, did you ever meet AKA's fiance Nelly? Did you know her at all?
I had not met her. I'm actually very close friends with AKA's mother, Lynn. And, I try and keep my relationship with her and her son and whoever he's dating out of the picture. But I was aware of, of the shift in the relationship. And, obviously I know Zinhle, and the whole thing was, was quite complicated. She was a young girl. I didn't know her personally. I didn't get to experience her personally. So I don't know her personality, whether she was bubbly or if you could have noticed highs. There was also quite a high profile in my social circles. His handle was the Dapper Black, Nate, a friend of Deleuze and all of that had committed suicide a few days before as well. So within my immediate circles, sort of 3 suicides in a week. It was 3 deaths, including Dr. Cindy, which sort of led me to write Dr. Cindy obviously was a COVID-related death, but I don't know. I felt the need to explain this to people because a lot of people are left bewildered. Like, what do you mean suicide? How did I not know this? How did I not pick this up? How did I not know that you could possibly be experiencing depression if you're a bubbly, outgoing person like myself?
Well, I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that I've had that exact same conversation with so many people where I've been the one to say, how is it that these people who look to the outside world so happy and they look so relaxed and they look like their life is good, how is it that those people are the ones who succumb to these demons?
I mean, do you remember honestly, when?
Like I've read so many people's explanations, and I thought yours was the best one I've understood so far. You went to some trouble to explain it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I've actually got a bit of a complex that I am not succinct enough and that I don't tell stories in a linear fashion, and that I don't have like clear narratives because I'm quite ADD and I like to write in free form. So sometimes my stuff doesn't follow like a particular narrative. And I realized that it whittled down to discipline and practice. And I've been practicing being thorough when I explain things.
Well, I mean, look, it's a totally different skill to what you do in stand-up, right? Because in stand-up, the whole way that the story weaves around is actually part of what makes it funny. And I think when you're writing things about serious stuff like this and people think you're funny, you have to be that much more careful not to be ridiculous, because you're dealing with something which is obviously the opposite of ridiculous. I wonder how many people are silently going through so much shit at the moment because, COVID might have just opened up a can of worms. We know that there are so many people who are pretending to be fine. And there's so many people who on social media are pretending not just to be fine, but great when they're really not. It's tough. It's tough in terms of health, obviously, with what's been going on. It's tough in terms of money for many people. It's tough in terms of the relationships that they do or don't have, the relationships that are either going much better than they think they deserve, or much worse than they had hoped they would be. And then there's a whole range of other shit. There's genetic stuff you inherit. There are people who just have the brain chemistry of just the brain chemistry just does not help them to live a very satisfactory life, and they beat themselves up over it.
When you don't know what it is, it's really hard to beat yourself. I mean, it's hard not to beat yourself up about it.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned these genetic factors, and particularly with something like bipolar, or I still say manic depression, but it's like saying on the radio. It's just
no, but you used manic depressive, and you explained why. Like, because there's two different aspects to being manic depressive, and that's why that term might have actually been better than bipolar. Because now everybody says they're bipolar, and actually, unless you've been diagnosed, you might just be talking out of turn, and frankly, making a mockery of the people who are really going through something.
Absolutely, sort of diminishing
talk about that mania.
Experience. So because a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so schizo, they're completely diminishing the value of what it is that you're experiencing. And also in what we are, I think people are confusing a polarized society with bipolar, like literally just not understanding what the word is. So, oh gosh, I'm trying to frame out my bed.
Don't worry. Is there someone in it?
Oh, please God, I wish there was. Sorry, the last one just got kicked to the curb.
The life and times of Nina Hasty.
The life and times of Nina Hasty. I must start dating adults. Maybe they'll last in relationships longer. Anyway, so and for the BCCSA, I do mean people over the age of 30 when I say adults. Anyway, manic depression is, you experience mania, right? So the mania is hypermania. So you can be extremely effective, very hyperactive. Your brain is firing at 1,000 miles an hour, right? You're just super functional. And the point I wanted to come to before this actually was manic depression or bipolar disorder can be dormant. You might have the genetic predisposition for it your whole life, but then it's triggered by a stressful event or triggered by a drug or alcohol infused or situation. So you might be predisposed to it, but then never actually experience the thing. So how come my sister isn't bipolar? Why is she not a quote unquote, why is she not crazy? How come you the one? Well, maybe she had a different set of circumstances growing up, and maybe she didn't blow her brains out on cocaine in her 20s, like I did. Also,
as Sia says, you have lived.
I have lived, honey. Child, one thing about me, I lived.
You have squeezed all the juice out of that lemon, girl. You've seen some things, you've zipped and done it, you've lived.
So
I've lived.
This mania is then, it's this real burst of energy which could last for hours or for minutes. You feel super
days
productive.
As well, Gavin. Gavin. Who's Gavin?
Gareth.
There's something I have not been called for a while, but don't worry. Okay, so mania, you said could last for days as well. But during that time, you're also really difficult to deal with because you are totally in your own head. You're almost babbling incoherently. You're doing hundreds of things at the same time. You think you're being effective. You may be very irritating too, and people will think, well, what the hell's wrong with this person?
Yes.
That's unusual.
Unreasonable.
But then what comes after that?
So then, because there's what happens in the brain is there might be a peak in serotonin or supplemented serotonin or dopamine via drugs, right? Or alcohol or perhaps just the mania or even caffeine. So the body's now gone ahead and said, okay, cool, I've got all these happy drugs in my brain. And then what happens is because that brain in particular cannot produce its own natural happy hormone. So it cannot produce the same amount of serotonin as everybody else. And as a result, the knock-on effect of the dopamine, which makes you feel happy once you've got the correct amount of serotonin in your brain, you crash. You are exceptionally sad. The physiological response is a depressed state, a sensation of being stuck, a sensation of a dark cloud being over you, a sensation of being the reversed unreasonable sensation in the other way. So when you're in the dark space at a 10, so let's say it can go from 1 to 10, I'm having a bit of a down day, to a 10 where you're completely unable to move, you physically can't get out of bed, you can't talk, you can't access anything, you're unable to function as a human being in society, and you have these depressive thoughts. You want to die. You think that you don't deserve to live. Now, you can have a downswing and still be at like a 1 or a 2 or a 3. This happens to me. I had a day the other day. I had so many things. I only had about 5.5 hours sleep, and I had a long day ahead of me, fitting with Levi's. I had to do this thing. The shoot carried on longer than I thought it would. And as that shoot progressed, and I'm sitting with these people, it was like Levi's house. They're fitting me. I'm trying on different clothes. There's a guy filming me. I have to be on. So it wasn't a matter of I could just like sort of relax and process this low on my own. And as this thing, as the day progressed, I just kept getting more and more paranoid. And it was a photographer or videographer's first time dealing with me. And I kept apologizing for existing. I kept going, I'm sorry, Jonathan. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that you have to meet me like this. I'm sorry that I'm I don't know why. And I kept apologizing to the people there, and they were all confused as to why I was apologizing. But what was happening inside my brain was an experience of paranoia. I was like, these people are judging me. These people hate me. These people have hated me their whole life. Or they don't think I deserve to live. They've been plotting against me. And actually, this whole thing is farce. The whole reason I'm here is because the one chick knows the other chick. Her neighbor once hated me in 2017 because that chick dressed me. And this is the narrative that's happening in my brain, all because of a lack of sleep.
So
and I mean, you said,
sorry, you said like a way of life now. Is this something that you are learning to manage? Is this something that can be cured?
So I've been on medication since I was about 17, on and off. Obviously, when I was in active addiction from the age of sort of about, like when it got really aggressive, between about 24 and 30, I wasn't on medication. And so I was sort of self-medicating, alcohol, cocaine, tranquilizers, sort of on that, trying to maintain my own mood, excuse me, but from a recreational perspective, because obviously I could experience what I was experiencing. I want to feel better. What must I do? I must take drugs.
Absolutely.
And after 30, I went back to a psychiatrist after I'd, been clean for a little bit, and the brain fog had lifted, and I knew that I wouldn't interfere with any brain chemicals, because also there was one time that I did go back onto medication in this, when I was about 24, and I got the most horrendous migraines as a result of a reaction to some of the medication, but that's because they were counterindicating with all the stuff that I was on. But like debilitating migraines, I couldn't walk. It was horrendous. I've never experienced anything like that. So you also have to make sure that when you do go onto medication, that your brain is clear, that there are no remnants of any sort of other chemicals in your system, because it can be very, very dangerous. So to answer your question, Sia, is this something I'm learning to deal with? Yes, it's a lifetime of learning. The brain is it's dynamic. It's, you're learning. There's new neural pathways that you're experiencing all the time. Some good, some bad, or some old neural pathways that you're using that have been part of a pattern that you have developed since you were young as a negative coping mechanisms. And a lot of that can be bad behavior. So being shitty to people, being aggressive, reacting instead of responding, making it all about you, having a little pity party. So what happens is, once your brain chemicals are okay, but your behavior is still patterned to your previous coping mechanisms, that's when it can become dangerous, and you blame everything on your mental health, quote unquote. So there's a
this is
responsibility as well.
I wanted to ask you about this because now, suddenly we're at a time where, people like Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are talking about mental health like it's, it's like it's having a bad night of sleep. And frankly, these are like the most privileged people in the world, and there's not a whole lot of sympathy. And it has become trendy for everyone to assume some kind of victim status wherever they can. And if they don't actually have a terrible life, in terms of those categories that I mentioned earlier, finances, health, relationships, whatever it might be, then they make one up. Then they go, oh, well, I'll claim to have huge mental health issues. And maybe they do and maybe they don't. It's not for me to judge. It's not for you to judge. But it does seem to me like it's particularly trendy at the moment. And I'm not in any way saying we shouldn't take everyone seriously just in case they are going through it. I think that's probably a better default position. But it is annoying to me that there are a bunch of people who've climbed on this bandwagon and who are actually doing a lot to make it seem that it's not as serious as it is. And that worries me.
To diminish the validity of it and
Correct.
the intensity of it and however, I am just going to say something. Remember when I said that bipolar can be triggered by an incident? So perhaps Meghan has lived her whole life, la-di-da, and the stress of, yes, there's the privilege and all the rest of it. I don't want to get into the Meghan Markle debate. However, there could have been a trigger from the pressure of that British media, which is fucking horrendous anyway.
They are horrendous, yeah.
So maybe there was a trigger, and as I said, it was lying dormant and she was predisposed to it, and all of a sudden she fucked out.
I always see these things that people post, and it never irritates me to see this, funnily enough. And I'm the kind of person who will make fun of just about anything. But when someone says, for example, you don't know what somebody else is going through, so just try to be kind. And I think maybe if we could
fuck off with the kind of be kind. Okay, I'm joking.
But really, like, I know, but it's a serious concern. Like, I do think that there are too many people in the world who are so wrapped up in like trying to define themselves, or trying to make themselves important, or trying to get a little bit of attention, that they forget that there's someone there who's on the edge, who might have not had the amount of sleep that they need, who maybe has just come down off some kind of drug binge, or who's got just terrible brain chemistry that doesn't help them to deal with stuff. And you get them at the wrong time. And in some way, you could indirectly make them do something that everyone's going to regret. Let's just kind of remember that, because that's the takeaway I got from all of your stuff, is that unless you understand all of this, and remember, it differs hugely from individual to individual. So there isn't a group classification that works, that fits the mold, the cookie cutter mold for everybody. And I think we've got to be aware of this stuff, right?
Gareth, I couldn't have said it better. You're right. Be aware. And what that, the being kind thing, again, it's also a very trendy thing to say. Everyone's like, be kind.
I know.
And then they don't follow through with that kind of behavior. Being kind involves not making everything about you in a society where we're taught to make everything about you. So we're living in this dichotomy. We're living in these double messages, me, I must be amazing. I must do this,
Well, you see it. You also see it when people die. And unfortunately, this is what kind of brings about so much of that narcissism. And, everybody thinks narcissism is this overt thing where you try to make yourself important. But when someone dies, then you have all these people trying to make it about them. And I posted something on Instagram about this yesterday to say, better make sure you get those pictures with all the celebrities you like, so that when they die, you can post things about you.
Oh.
Know what I mean?
Or screen grab your fucking text messages and post them on the social media. Like, okay, cool, you've got connection. Like, yes, we've all got connection. We've got connection. We've got pain. We're experiencing all of these things together. So there was something very interesting that I learned at AA, and it was, so it's also in the very early stages, when you my first year of sobriety was fucking mortifying. I was like, oh my God, is that what I did? Is that what I said? I mean, you've known me for years. You knew me during active addiction and then like in the early stages of my sobriety. And, you know, I got to the point where I could make jokes about it. But prior to that,
I was one of the people who was petitioning for you to get a constant supply because I thought you were being hilarious and I didn't want you to stop.
Gosh.
I'm not the guy.
ladies and gentlemen, an
just
enabler.
Yeah, just so that everybody knows, I'm not the guy you must come to when you have these problems.
That's hysterical. I think, but I was actually sober when I was on Cliff Central. I was already in my sobriety stage, but I was lavishing in my memories. But I'd gotten to the point where I was no longer embarrassed about them and I could celebrate them. But what happens is you start creating a pity party, like, oh, I'm so bad, I'm the worst person, I'm a terrible person, I did this and I did that, and that
so
becomes part of that narrative. Yes, it's the self-indulgence, it's the pity party. You've made it again about you. Oh, okay, cool, you're so bad. Yes, okay, cool, get out of yourself. So
this is I just want to point out something here that Tracy's saying. She says she's listening to us now and she says feeling emotional versus being depressed, there's a huge difference. You're depressed, you don't feel depressed. You know, like some people also say when they're having a bad day, oh, I'm depressed, or you know, like something doesn't go their way and you should be upset, frankly, when things don't go your way. Otherwise you're just not connected to reality. That doesn't mean you're depressed.
You know, Gareth, I was with Hanan yesterday, Dr. Hanan Bushkin, my cognitive behavioral therapist, who you guys know. And, you know, I had just had a scheduled appointment as opposed to just kind of, you know, like my friend died and I rushed off to see Hanan. It just was, coincidental. And he was, I said to him, I asked him, what does depression mean? What does depression mean? What does it mean to be depressed? And he said, well, we could list symptoms. The sensation of being stuck, of not having, so sadness and depression feel the same in terms of, you know, the sensation of being stuck, like, oh, I don't have a solution for this. That's why people confuse those two. The sensation of being stuck. However, with depression, there are symptoms, physiological symptoms. So your brain and your body are now in a position where they are physiologically not able to create the hormones to make you stop feeling unstuck. Now
that's why you need the medicine as well as the therapy, because you can't get out of it just with the therapy. I'm gonna just pause this for a second because I mean we've been talking about it for like 20 minutes or 25 minutes or whatever, and I've just got to throw in some headlines, and I know we've got Jean-Jacques Cornish standing by, so we can carry this on in a moment or two. But let me get to some of the headlines for this morning. Sorry to force us to have to change subject so dramatically, but there's quite a lot going on and we don't want to be left behind. Bantu Holomisa wants a vote on Mkhwebane's impeachment committee. Bantu Holomisa is just really struggling for relevance at the moment, and I don't think he's a bad person. We've interviewed him many times before. I do think he's made an enormous difference to our democracy, but really he's fading fast in terms of his relevance. And, you know, he says a couple of things more than just once in a while that make a huge amount of sense. And I do wish he had more say, but he represents a tiny little party and he gets a lot more airtime than he's maybe due just because he's been so interconnected with so many people, both in the ANC and out. And, you know, in terms of his position as someone who certainly in the Transkei was very important, he punches well above his weight, but he reckons he should be allowed to vote as well, even though he doesn't have a seat in that committee, because he thinks that she's really bad, this Busisiwe Mkhwebane, and he wants her out. So if you think that that's what's necessary, then you're on Bantu Hulumisa's side. But he really is trying to also stay relevant, which is why he finds this a useful and interesting moment to join in the conversation.
Being politicians politicking.
Absolutely. So let's look at that quickly. Then there's the EFF. While we're talking about little parties, there's this bizarre story that came out over the weekend. And again, I am always very reticent, whether they are friends or foes, to take any serious charges, especially of a criminal nature, that are leveled against someone, in this case, rape against Buyiseni Ndlozi. Got to take these things seriously, obviously, but you don't prejudge it, no matter how much you like or dislike the person in question.
Has it confused you, this story? Because
Totally.
I'm not understanding the statement. I'm not understanding what the police are saying. I'm not understanding what the EFF is saying. I think you have an update on what the EFF stance is.
So the EFF on Monday said it was aware of coordinated attempts to criminalize its leaders. The Daily Sun reported that Mbuyiseni Ndlozi was being investigated for rape. The newspaper claims the report was based on a 23-year-old woman's affidavit. According to the article, the woman claims she was violated in an upmarket penthouse by a man who goes by the name of Quinton, who she later discovered was Ndlozi. Ndlozi's middle name is Quinton, but he's told the paper, it was a case of mistaken identity. So I know that there are a lot of people who really don't like the EFF, and they look at this and they go, "Ooh, I knew that Mbuyiseni Ndlozi was a terrible person." You know, it's like there are people who love Mbuyiseni Ndlozi who are going to be saying now, no, this is impossible. It must be true that it's mistaken identity. Why don't we wait and see? And if it does end up becoming a criminal matter, all the evidence will have to be brought. If it isn't, it is pure rumor and speculation, and the kind of rumor and speculation that can ruin somebody. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is a lot of really dodgy politicking going on behind the scenes. I also wouldn't be surprised if, frankly, it ended up being true. But let's see. I'm not going to prejudge the situation. And those people who do are giving themselves powers they don't have. You are not Nostradamus, and you also are not a judge in a court in South Africa that has to look at this and weigh up the evidence. And certainly if you were, you don't have the evidence yet. So hold back, everybody, because I hate when these things happen and people just jump in and they've got an opinion, point of view. This is obviously true. This is obviously not true. And then it becomes a whole thing of believe the victim or believe the perpetrator. Who cares what you believe? Let's deal with facts here. We're dealing with people's lives. If it happened, then someone must go to jail. If it didn't happen, then nobody must make allegations that it happened or say, because they might be making it up, that more than what happened. So let's just wait and see, shall we? Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Gareth, I've also been quite public. You know what? I vulnerability is such a trend as well at the moment, which I think that's ironic as well, because I feel that vulnerability is important, but I think it needs to have a validity in the conversation that you're trying to have. I have shared about my rape experience. I've shared about my alcoholism. I've shared about all of these things. So you don't want to just jump on every bandwagon, because I feel like a lot of people have experienced a lot of trauma. However, with regards to this, I have experienced rape. I've experienced date rape. The same scenario with this chick where you sort of like half drugged at a party, seen someone, been confused. You're like, did I have sex, or was I had sex with that kind of experience? It's dangerous on both sides.
Hugely dangerous.
So, just to mention someone's name and to Google them, I could have Googled some guy called Gavin and been like, oh, actually, it sounds like Gareth. And there was a blonde man in my vicinity, or, that's dangerous. But I don't want to diminish the experience that this woman is having. And I also don't want to.
I don't care much for anyone's personal experience if it's a criminal matter, though. There are ways to deal with these things, and she can go and talk to her therapist about her experience if she has one, or her family or her friends, and she can make a story of it once it's been proven. But you don't go around alleging things have happened irresponsibly. And you also, if you are the kind of person who has been through something and you want us to take it seriously, then you need to have your ducks in a row. And I know many women have gone through awful experiences and they can't always put it together. And by no means am I saying that this is made up. And at the same time, by no means am I saying Mbuyiseni Ndlozi is definitely a rapist. We've got to be careful, because the moment we do that, and it happens now on social media, you've got a kangaroo court of people who've decided this woman must be taken down because she's making fake allegations. I mean, that's hugely dangerous. As it is to allege something's happened. Yeah, we've got to take it seriously.
It's all dangerous because you also don't want to position yourself as a rape apologist that feeds into
Definitely.
rape culture, which feeds into this conversation.
Yeah.
Gareth, I think this is a very important thing for you to discuss. I'm going to step off for 2 minutes, and I'll catch up with
No
you
worries.
later.
Yeah, we've got Jean-Jacques coming on in a moment. Nina's going to make a quick call, and we'll get on with that in a second. And Jean-Jacques is standing by, so I don't want to take too long. But while we're talking about something which just beleaguers and bedevils South Africa endlessly, 131 reported rapes in Mitchell's Plain between just March and December of last year, and 0 convictions. That's according to the Western Cape Community Safety Department. There's a whole lot of slacktivism online about this stuff, and people claiming that we've got this rape culture, and we certainly have a huge problem in this country. But when 131 rapes are reported, and you can only imagine how many are not even reported, and there are 0 convictions for the whole of last year in terms of lockdown, that is something we should be horrifically embarrassed about. And it really it is unacceptable on every single level. It makes a mockery of our justice system. It makes perpetual victims of women who eventually think, well, you know what, I can't get out of this because no one's going to help me. And even if I do take it seriously and I do go to the police and I do open a case and I am open and honest with my family and my friends, and they support me, and all the things that I need to happen in order to make this happen take place from my point of view, and then the system lets you down like this, it is just unacceptable. And those 131 reported rapes are just the tip of the iceberg in this country, and it frightens me what's going on under the water. So the questions of how these rape cases are dealt with and investigated and prosecuted are being brought to the fore after worrying statistics came out of that's just Mitchell's Plain on Monday, and not one conviction, which is just awful. And the MEC for Community Safety, Albert Fritz, said that there were only 83 arrests, and he's asked about the remaining 48 rape cases. He said, of those 83 cases, 59 people were still awaiting trial, and only one trial's actually commenced. So we are letting people down, innocent people who deserve more and deserve better. Ugly, ugly story. It's not the kind of thing that can make for a good start to your Tuesday, I'm afraid, but we're not going to ignore it. There's a manhunt after an execution shooting in Paris. Just briefly, a man in his 30s was killed and a female security guard injured at the Henri Dunant Geriatric Hospital, which is also a COVID vaccination center. Witnesses says the attacker shot the man in the head before calmly walking away and making off on a motorcycle. Like in a movie. The local mayor says terrorism does not appear to have been the motive. The mayor of the 16th district, Francis Spinaire, added that the vaccination center did not seem to be a target either. A local police officer told the BMF TV channel that the attack looked like a settling of scores. So very bizarre situation in France. And then finally, as far as headlines go this morning, this from EWN, the UK has launched an inquiry into the lobbying scandal involving ex-Prime Minister David Cameron. This is why, and I love when politicians think they've gotten away with things. And this also happened to Nicolas Sarkozy. And then they are later brought in front of the court and forced to explain. And sometimes they're also sent to jail, although rarely with politicians, over things that they didn't do according to the book while they were in office. And I just think, if you have very strict rules for politicians, then the rest of us will probably follow those strict rules too. If you have very lax rules for politicians and they can get away with murder, then the ordinary people think, well, if they can get away with it, so can we. So David Cameron's come out and had to defend himself on the lobbying of ministers prior to the collapse of a finance firm called Greensill. A day after he broke his silence on the scandal, Downing Street said the inquiry would be led by a senior lawyer, Nigel Boardman, and they would report back promptly. So we'll see what happens there. It is time for Africa Analysis. This is where we talk to Jean-Jacques Cornish, who is an expert on the continent and someone who has helped us to understand what's going on in Africa to a far greater degree than any of us could have on our own. So Jean-Jacques, nice to see you, and thanks for being on the TV show this week. We had Jean-Jacques on when we recorded yesterday for So What Now, and he'll be on tomorrow night on the TV show. How are you, sir? You're on mute, Jojo. Oh, yeah, just unmute your microphone, and then we should be good to go.
Is that better?
Voila.
Got me now.
Voila. Yeah, there we are.
You've given me a great idea. You know, I watch the Masters or bits of the Masters. It would not occur to me to play a game of golf, but I like watching it. And when they see the guy emerging as the winner, in this case, the first Japanese guy to win a major, they take him and measure him for that green jacket that they give him, you know. Yeah. I think that when you stand for parliament or you become a politician, you should immediately be taken somewhere and measured for an orange jumpsuit. Doesn't that sound?
I think that's a very good idea.
You've got
I like that a lot.
You just pop into the cell.
Yeah. And we even provisionally book you a cell. I mean, it does mean that people who take up political office will be a little more careful if they know that they could be investigated even post their term of office. And we've got a former president in this country who he thinks he's like Teflon and that the law doesn't apply to him. We will see what happens. At the moment, the law doesn't apply to him.
He's not exclusive in that regard. Many politicians believe it doesn't apply to them, you know. And I mean, we have David Cameron now. He was lobbying. It was all about vaccines as well, you know. So when it involves COVID vaccines and skullduggery, then you've got serious crimes. I mean, Tedros Ghebreyesus, who we're going to talk about in a minute, he refers to any kind of fraud involving COVID as murder. And I think he's absolutely right. So, I mean, Cameron has some explaining to do. And as Prime Minister, do you think he didn't know what he was doing? And the people that he spoke to didn't know what was happening? You know, it boggles the mind. And when they stand there in Parliament and fulminate against people, they'd say, well, you know, ignorance of the law is no excuse, or what was he thinking? And would he for a moment think anybody in their right mind or any sane thinking person wouldn't understand what was happening? Well, in this case, he believes they don't.
Well, it's time for us to catch up on Africanalysis. It's our bi-monthly feature. It's sponsored by the Johannesburg Business School, and we look at what's going on the African continent. So, JJ Cornish, let's go straight to the WHO. You mentioned Tedros, the doctor at the head of the WHO. And he says that people should be accused of murder if they've been complicit in COVID irregularity, disinformation, lies, deceit, inaction, all of that stuff. Just explain where these comments come from. We seem to have lost JJ.
That was earlier comments. I'm always reluctant. The is a long way from over. A long way from over. Confusion is causing the systemic continue, and he says be under control in months. If we
no, JJ, I'm gonna let you go there. That's it's getting messy. We're just gonna try and reconnect with JJ because that's no good. Sia, just tell him to come back on. I didn't understand a word. You know, when it takes a while and then it all comes on at once, it's like it buffered and then suddenly it sounds like a word salad. No use at all.
That I did not catch.
By the way, we'll also talk to JJ in a moment when he's back about Somalia and about why Ghana is the African headquarters for a major organization. We'll find out all about that in just a moment or two. It's always good to check in with JJ. There's a whole lot of stuff going on that we don't know about unless we chat to him. And by the way, we'll also have Sibulele Siko-Shosha, who is an entrepreneur and the founder of the Dumele Group, later on in the show to talk about business in South Africa and what's going on there. Also, the lessons that entrepreneurs need to learn and be aware of in South Africa. And Sibulele will be joining us. She's in Cape Town, and she'll be joining us on Skype or on Zoom or on this, whatever this stuff is called that we're on. What is it called again?
Stuff is called?
Well, you're on YouTube with us, so that's all that matters, right? I mean, I don't know what to call it. Sometimes I get it wrong.
Don't worry, she'll come to us. That's the bottom
Yeah,
line.
she'll come to us. She'll be here. If you can hear us now, you'll hear her. We also have a brand new season of Blind History launching this week, which is very, very exciting. And we'll get to that in a moment. JJ, I see you back.
Hopefully.
Yes. Sorry, so you were telling us about Tedros and the speech that he made. So let's pick it up there.
Well, and complacent nation and
No, I'm not getting him.
No, this is very frustrating. Sorry, JJ. I don't know what's going on there, but we're struggling with probably some internet issues. Who the hell knows? I'm just going to go to some of the comments here. Oh, no, Sia. Let's just see if we can't try one more time. This is much too annoying when it buffers like that. Very, very difficult. We'll come back to Nina as well. She hasn't left us, I promise. She's joining us in just a moment or two. So we'll come back with Nina Hasty just now. Just trying to get a better connection with JJ Cornish to see what this Dr. Tedros says. Just by the way, I mean, he's not an uncontroversial figure himself, Tedros Ghebreyesus. He's originally from Ethiopia, and you'll remember he was appointed to the WHO and as head of the WHO in some controversy. A big backer of his is China, and as a result, he's a big backer of China. But we've got to hear what he had to say, because now we've started this conversation, so I don't want to leave it hanging. Should we try one more time, Sia? Let's just give it one more go. Hi. Now it's good. Go ahead.
Hopefully. Well, we were saying Tedros Ghebreyesus is saying the confusion and complacency rule when it comes to dealing with COVID, that the ICUs overflowing and the people dying in what is the third wave is totally avoidable, and that we can end this pandemic in months if we bring it under control, and that will require proper vaccination. You know, we're getting stories, Gareth, of the economic hit by the pandemic being less, certainly in Africa, than we feared it would be. But we still have, I think, on this continent, a third wave to come. The second wave being 30% heavier than the first. I think the second wave being 30% heavier, indeed, yes. I think the third will be even heavier than that. And the vaccinations in Africa, that is, of course, the very big problem. We've got to become,
but is
get the
that
jab
true?
into the arms of Africans all over the continent.
Is that true? In South Africa, we've pretty much reached the stage of herd immunity, despite a hugely inefficient rollout of vaccines. I mean, we're seeing numbers that are absolutely minimal at the moment. In fact, I don't even know why we're still at level 1, because it appears, to all intent and purposes, that we have a very low infection rate at the moment. The reported cases are lower than ever. Our hospitals have never been overrun. So it's all it's sounding like a bit of scaremongering. You know, if you just look back instead of forward and try to predict things, it seems that we're actually not in a bad position.
I don't think, again, I think I'm hearing a bit of complacency, I'm afraid. Now are really not those that pertain. I think it's what happens in 2 weeks' time, and we not looking backwards but looking forwards. Every time it has occurred, the waves have hit us sometime later. So I don't think we can afford to become complacent at all. This issue of herd immunity, the number of people who've been vaccinated is lamentably low still. And the rollout of the vaccination program has not been successful. The government, I think, cracked down perhaps too early with the first wave. But I think the tough measures taken have been necessary.
All right, I'm afraid I'm going to have to let JJ go here. It's getting too frustrating to try and have a conversation now with this internet issue that we've got. I just want to point out, in contrast, now I'm not looking for a fight with JJ, but the new cases as of the 11th of April, only 931 new cases. The 7-day average, 928. Remember, we reached our peak in January, at 17,400 new cases on that day. And I'm pulling this straight from the COVID data that was updated 2 days ago by the government. So we have no reason to disbelieve it. We've had only 53,000 deaths in South Africa. And people keep telling us there's this boogeyman around the corner. I'm sorry, I just don't see it. So based only on what we've been through, I don't know how much of this is necessarily worth worrying about. And if Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus thinks that I should be executed for that, it's too bad, I suppose. I'm gonna have to call it off for this morning. See, I don't think we go back to African analysis. We're already at 7, and we will try to make up for this. We'll try to get JJ back. It's very frustrating when this stuff happens, and trust me, it's happened more than a couple of times on the TV show too. It drives me absolutely crazy. I actually long for the day where we can all be in studios again, talking to each other. And if someone's late, you just know that they're around the corner or whatever. You don't have to keep trying to connect. It's very frustrating for all parties involved. So, JJ, I'm sorry about that. We'll try to get back to you. All right, it is 7, and that means that we've got a whole hour more for you on the way. We've got Nina Hasty, who will be back with us in just a moment or two. We'll also check in with Sibulele, who I told you about earlier, and we'll talk about entrepreneurship and lots of other things. It's all coming up. cliffcentral.com. On a Tuesday morning. Let us know what you're up to. All you have to do is get hold of us on 0797482090, or you can send us a message on YouTube.
This week on Auto Central.
We're only buying A&G line.
Yeah.
We're not buying the run-of-the-mill executive line or exclusive line, whichever one it is. So they've changed up the grille. They all get this diamond pattern and the twin spar treatment off the sides of the badge, reprofiled the headlights, full LED units there, and of course the lower apron has been changed. They've done similar around the back where they've given it new tail lights with LED elements, modified the bumper a little bit, and then they made some changes to the interior.
Blind History is back for its 5th season. The award-winning podcast takes a look at some of the most enduring heroes, greatest statesmen, most reprehensible villains, and despicable tyrants of history. Join me, Gareth Cliff, and my co-host Anthony Mederer for the new series of Blind History. It's available on cliffcentral.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Stop it now, I mean it.
Now stopping it, the beat won't stop, and there's just no stopping it, the beat won't stop, and there's just no stopping it, the beat won't stop, won't stop, won't stop, beat won't stop, and there's just no stopping it, the beat won't stop, and there's just no stopping it, the beat won't stop, and there's just no stopping it, the beat won't stop, won't stop, won't stop, beat won't stop, and there's just no stopping it, the beat won't stop, and there's just no stopping it, the beat won't stop, and there's just no stopping it, the beat won't stop, won't stop, won't stop.
Stop.
We live in a rapidly changing world, but how we get paid remains stubbornly outdated.
We have this archaic payday cycle.
The Future of Pay is a podcast series that explores the impact that the current salary status quo has on South Africans.
When you are desperate, you will do anything to get that money to put food on your table for your family by tomorrow evening.
And how innovative startup SmartWage is looking to change things.
There's a very simple problem here. People are waiting till the end of the month to get paid, and the impact is that they can't afford expenses that come up during the middle of the month.
The Future of Pay, brought to you by SmartWage, available on cliffcentral.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. All right, we are live, cliffcentral.com, and it is a Tuesday morning. It's the 13th of April. Nina Hasty's with us. Nina, we're looking at your boobs at the moment. There we are.
Yay! What a treat.
Yeah, not that I was complaining. I mean, it's a good view for many people, but I don't want you to be objectified so early in the morning. We don't want.
You know what? I give you permission this morning because I need a bit of validation. Self-esteem is an environmental factor, Gareth.
There we
Keep
go.
it very PG-13, please.
Sia, what is your Twitter handle, please, sir?
This is good.
We will tweet you. Don't worry.
No. Go ahead. Tell us, Sia. What's your Twitter handle? Go on.
At Said by Sia. These are house. Yes.
Because I mean, I was just trying to give you guys a little bit of promo on my platform. I know you guys are a small up and coming station, so I'm just doing my best to facilitate your level up. Just give you a bit of exposure.
Well, listen, while we're talking about exposure, let's just talk about exposure for a second, because Sia has found an interesting story. What happened?
This is exposure, and then she kicked herself off.
Yeah. So Sia's got a story about OnlyFans, and while he's getting Nina back on, let me explain what OnlyFans is to those people who don't know. OnlyFans is the site basically where people create content, but it's basically just porn, and they then sell the content to an audience that is subscribed. So it's like it's a subscription porn service, basically. And OnlyFans, according to Sia anyway, this is a story he found, they say that they are seeing record numbers of people creating content, which means obviously lots and lots of people are looking for ways to find money. It's a sign of unemployment, obviously. But what's the story? Does this include South Africa?
So no, we don't have numbers for South Africa just yet. These are numbers from the UK. The UK has seen a downturn when it comes to jobs in the hospitality industry, and these were jobs that were taken up a lot by students, for example. So I guess students, have no jobs, have youth on their side. So they're saying, well, how else can we make quick money? This is how they're very serious about their OnlyFans new profession. Not only have they joined OnlyFans, they have also joined the English Collective of Prostitutes. This is a
I like that
union.
name.
Sure.
A union.
The union
for
of prostitutes.
Yes. And there's even a helpline for this union, and they say they have seen a 1/3 increase in 2021 alone from students who joined the porn and OnlyFans movement. So they're taking this quite seriously to get advice, to understand, how they will get their full pay, to understand guidelines for prostitution in the UK. These people are properly taking this seriously.
I have something to say with regards to this, Gareth, if I may.
By all means.
So I was doing like a Nina Hasty search online, just to check for, my brand management. And as I was doing, also because I'm a narcissist and there's that, let's be honest, I found a site called WikiFeet, and there are about 167 posts of Nina Hasty's feet that somebody has collated that people contribute to, and I was completely unaware of that. And I was explaining this to a friend of mine, and they're like, well, why don't you start an OnlyFans? If there's already an appetite, quote unquote, for, images of your feet, why don't you do that? And then I also want to start an ASMR site where I, read South African history in a sexy voice. And, but maybe I could just do some soft porn as she gently grabs his throbbing member.
No. Like, it's amazing to me, like your feet, you had no idea that there was some, and it's probably not just one creep, but there are probably a few who are so into, they've collected pictures of your feet. Now, would these be like screenshots from when you've done live stage shows and you've been wearing open shoes? Would it be from when you've posted stuff on your own Instagram and they've taken that stuff and they've made a whole like collection of it?
Stuff that I was like, who the fuck took a photo of me at Yo TV when I was wearing those open toe shoes? Also, where are those open toe shoes? Somebody must have stolen them off the set of Training SA because I fucking miss those babies.
That is so
Nina,
unbelievable.
were you like disgusted or more actually like
Yeah.
flattered
I was just
that
like,
this was going on?
no, I was pissed off that I'm not monetizing it. Have you met me?
Right.
Oh.
I was absolutely upset about that because, and so I'm actually going to investigate, and I'm opening an OnlyFans. End of story. I'm going to be selling images of my feet, and I will be reading soft porn as an ASMR site.
So ASMR is this thing that we also only found out about. I only found out about it 2 years ago or whatever. It's where these people breathe into microphones and they make like noises. And
they do this, like, listen to, can you pump the cheese up on my mic? I'm going to step really closely and I'm going to drink my coffee in a ASMR way.
Okay.
So I'm sitting with Gareth and,
yeah, this is what people get off on. All right, so
a lot of people play that while they're playing games and while they're playing video games because it's soothing. And I came across a guy that does life coaching, this old man that had over 2.4 million, or I think it might have even been 4 million downloads on YouTube, where it was an accidental ASMR. He was giving a lesson on life lessons and history and the meaning of life, but because he had such a soothing, quote unquote, boring voice, it became like a very popular ASMR feed.
Listen, I don't think there's, you can decide what you want to put on your OnlyFans. And I think if this is something that you can make some money off of, sure. But I wonder how many people actually make really good money on a site like this and whether or not you can make a living on it. And then further than that, is it something that you're going to, in 10 to 20 years' time, feel really bad about? Because it's just money. But if you aren't doing, the ASMR stuff that Nina says, or you may be putting pictures of your feet or whatever it is that turns on the freaks on the internet. And this is all because these days people want instant gratification, and it's never enough to just do the ordinary stuff. You have to do the wacky stuff because people are bored. They sit on the internet all day and they're looking for their kinks and their weirdnesses and their particular, turn-ons.
Japanese shibari. Something.
What? Yeah, well, I don't even know what that is, but okay,
exactly.
You teach us stuff. I'm just amazed that this has become such an easy route to making money for so many people, and I wonder if it's good in the long term. Let's talk about that.
Gareth, listen to this. According to the ECP, let's call them the ECP because it's that professional, the English Collective of Prostitutes.
Sure.
And their numbers that they're looking at. Given the fact that now there's this increase in students who are entering, the average, they have an average here of looking at the students who've joined, having a debt of about $40,000 of student debt.
Wow.
And now through OnlyFans, they're earning about $10,000 a month.
That's huge.
OnlyFans.
That is massive. I was reading yesterday.
That's good money, right? That's a lot of money. Yeah.
So they can pay off their student debts in like
industry.
4 months.
4 months. That's crazy. Our food and beverage industry has basically almost collapsed. It's gone from about 500 million rand that contributes to the GDP annually to 250 million rand. That's half. And if a lot of those people are service-oriented people, so it's, your waiters, your chefs, your, part-time people, as well as like shopkeepers, et cetera, et cetera. That's an entire industry that has been affected. And, I think that, I hope that there is an appetite for it. I think it's great. I'm all for safe sex work. I'm all for people that can utilize whatever they can in a safe, protected, unionized situation. I think that that's very progressive, Sia.
But don't you worry about how these people might, you know what people are like. There's two obvious ways this can go. Either we all end up naked on the internet and nobody cares anymore, which is possible. I've often said on the show that I think that's a likely outcome, where eventually there's no private life, and everything that you do is online, and every movement you make and every person you visit and every place you go and everything you buy is publicly available. And it's not an ideal situation, but it may be one of the options for the future. And then there's the opposite one where people try to maintain some privacy, but what happens is that when they run for office one. I mean, you can already see this with tweets. Like someone will go in, and they did this with Trevor Noah famously when he got the Tonight Show. I mean, the Daily Show. He went on the show, and then some horrible person goes in and trawls through like tweets from 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whenever he started on Twitter, and they try to to make him seem like an asshole because of something off color that he said a few years ago. And believe me, no one in the world should have anything held against them they did before they were 25 years old. No one. In fact, I think you should be allowed to start from scratch and have your record expunged if you are 25 and you're trying to be taken seriously. You don't agree?
Unless you're the killer. I mean,
I agree.
No.
I agree. I'd even push it up to about 30. Just to protect myself.
I see where this was going, actually. It's a little too personal.
Yeah, look, I've only recorded one sex tape in my life on my own camera. And if that ever leaked, the only reason I'd be upset is because I looked fat in it. Otherwise, I mean, my skills are unmatched, so I was just like, I got a bit of belly fat there.
Good for you, though. Simba says he knows a girl who was a flight attendant until March of last year. She decided to start an OnlyFans and made a killing without having to go full nude. She will not be going back to her day job. So it's a kind of, I suppose, once you've decided to make that move, it's really just a question of how much money you can make. And I suppose, they're going to be weird and kinky things that happen there. And there are going to be some very ordinary ones where people are just showing pictures of their feet, if you consider that ordinary. And maybe for some people, this is a great source of passive income.
Look, it's funny that I got to this story yesterday because, we interviewed the famous Gigi a few weeks or now months ago, actually. Gigi, renowned stripper, but she owns a strip club here in Johannesburg. And in the process, I'm trying to just put the disclaimer up front, but also it's not my cup of tea. In the process of researching and finding out more about her, I discovered that I actually liked her strip club page on Facebook.
Oh, nice. So you don't have to disclose it.
No. It was yesterday that this post popped up that she was looking for strippers. I thought, clearly I couldn't be one of the girls, but what if I got some of the girls? Would that technically make me a madam? And if
like a pyramid scheme, like a stripper pyramid scheme, like Amway.
Like the Herbalife of strippers. I mean, you and Nina would be an unstoppable force. If you two went around, if you recruited girls and you actively managed their careers for them as strippers, you could make a nice little commission there.
I was actually going to mention earlier, so friends of mine, because I mix in such dynamic circles, there's a friend of mine who sort of popularized, or she was the first girl to do it, or the first like student, and not like an immigrant, because I mean, a lot of the stripper, what's the word I'm looking for, but community
Russian
are often
women.
Immigrants. Yeah, I'm trying to say this in a nice way, in the most politically correct way, for fuck's sakes, because Vladimir Putin could be listening to me.
Yes.
So she started stripping at Mavericks to pay for her varsity fees and to make a living. She now lives in Los Angeles and is doing collaborations with Tommy Lee, and she married a guy called Moonbounce. Anyway,
wow.
But yeah, it's a long fucking story. Anyway, but there were a group of girls and one phenomenal chick who was studying at Michaela's. She was studying art curation and also stripping at Mavericks, which is, for me, I think, so empowering. And I just wish that my body was in the shape that it needed to be. I would do it tomorrow. I first of all, I'm into sort of voyeurism and exhibitionism. I think it's quite cool. So as long as there's a safe environment, I'd do it myself. Never mind recruiting anyone else. I like the concept of it.
Yeah, I think you walk a very difficult line though, because I share a similar sentiment to you. I'm like, if people are if they have agency and there's no duress, in other words, you're not being forced into it, you're not someone who's doing it out of sheer desperation. There are people who do, probably a very small minority of them, but there are people who probably do it because they actually like it. They enjoy it. They enjoy the attention. They enjoy the money. They consider it to be a profession for them. That's something that they take seriously. That's great. But I don't believe that the majority of people in the sex trade necessarily can tick all those boxes. And I feel sorry for a lot of women who are exploited, as I feel sorry for a lot of men who need to exploit those women. I think there's a kind of a toxic relationship that's going on there, which is bad for both of them in the long run. But you know what? As far as OnlyFans is considered, I mean, that you don't have to be around the actual clients. The clients pay for you across the internet. You can put up your content. They get what they want from the content. You get the money you want from them. You probably never need to meet any of these people. And thanks to COVID restrictions, you probably can't meet them anyway. So maybe it's the safest way for people to interact. I do despair for Generation Z ever being able to have actual real world sex and real world relationships and real world conversations, because I do think that's becoming harder and harder. And as easy as it is now to see someone naked or to get porn from them, it's so much harder than it ever has been to have real, meaningful, deep relationships with people, if that's what you're looking for.
You know what's so interesting, Gareth? Because, of course, I have the emotional maturity of a 27-year-old man. I was dating a 27-year-old man recently, and we were, we were having a conversation, and I was like, well, I'll see you a little bit later, and like a video call that he was, he was driving, his phone was on the hands-free kit or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing you later, and I was saying something quite provocative, and he went immediately, he's like, I'll text you what I want to say. And because he was incapable of having the conversation of mentioning sex on a phone call. And also in real life, when we were engaging, he was incapable of talking about vulnerable, intimate things because people hide behind these screens. It's easier for them to type it, and they're not used to using their words in real life. They're shy. They've lost the ability to socialize properly. I hear what you're saying, Gareth.
Yeah, I think this is something, I mean, we've spoken about it on the show before, where so many people under the age of let's say 30 as an arbitrary number, if you actually phone them instead of texting them, they freak out completely. They're only used to getting phone calls from work or from people who they're in trouble with. Or telemarketers, and therefore they completely freak out if someone that they actually know and who's their friend calls them. They usually think, oh my God, it's an emergency, and their panic levels go sky high. I think this is bad, and I don't know that OnlyFans, while I'm, all the things I've said before are valid, I do think that like a lot of people have lost the ability to do these things in person, and this is going to make it worse, not better, for those people. These incels and these real losers. And even Bill Maher, who I often refer to on the show, Bill Maher said in a recent show of his, he reckons that a lot of the trouble that we see in society, a lot of the anxiety, the difficulties, because a lot of people don't know how to get laid anymore. Guys and girls, they don't know how to make themselves sexy anymore. They're used to only doing everything through these phones, right? They've forgotten how to be conversational, interesting, have some game, be able to flirt, be able to enjoy each other's company. People have gone straight to sex in some cases, and OnlyFans is an example of that, or they're just too terrified to ever even dip their toe in. And they end up very, very unhappy. And listen, this is where a lot of these mass shooters come from, in America anyway. This is where a lot of these abusers come from, because they've just never been conditioned to normal human interaction. They're so afraid of being in a room alone with like a Nina Hasty because they're worried about what they're going to say. They're anxious about what they're going to do. It's a disaster for humanity. I mean, we've already got the lowest levels of sex in Gen Z that we've ever had in measurable human sex history. That's scary.
I mean, just last week we were discussing how Chinese authorities were getting involved in singles and having to pair them up, because a lot of them are just living single and happy.
Yeah.
That's really interesting for me, in that I feel maybe, and correct me if I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan, but he was saying that humanity is going to get to a point where we sort of reach a peak of population. Some shit is going to happen, whether it's biological or some climate change or a famine or whatever the case may be, and we'll normalize back down to a population that is manageable for the earth. And do you think that in some way that this is going to be some bizarre accidental population control solution?
Well, you mean like almost like it's a social control switch that's been flipped, and that people are being put off sex, and that they're being put off procreating. I mean, we already know that there's, in some countries, like for example in Japan, they've got a major discrepancy between their birth and death rate. They've got way too many old people, and the young people are not having children. And in Scandinavia, the governments of Denmark and Norway and Sweden are trying to pay people to go on holiday. Well, this is before COVID, but to go on holiday to have romantic relationships, so that they'll produce children. Because of course these countries are built on a welfare system where when you're older, the younger population can continue working and supporting that older population. If you have too many old people, there's no one to earn the money, and your country goes into decline, and they can't afford to keep everybody alive. So maybe you're right. I mean, I don't know much about overpopulation, but I think this has to do with technical stuff like social media and with devices, which we're on all the time. And I think it also has to do with the fact that people aren't taught this stuff. You don't learn this. And you imagine what an impact a year of not being in school with other kids is going to have on kids in the long run. But nobody sits you down when you go into adulthood, unless you've got parents who are really involved and care about you. And let's face it, there are so many dysfunctional parents in this world too, that you'd never get told by someone, except occasionally your friends. And sometimes that's the bad advice that you shouldn't be getting. But no one says to you, this is how you flirt with a girl in a non-aggressive. Yeah, nobody says to you, this is how you flirt with a girl. This is how you make conversation. This is what you talk about with strangers. This is what you do with people you like being around. This is how you laugh together. No one's teaching people that. And this stuff, I'm afraid, doesn't. WhatsApping is not the same as being in someone's company.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had a friend come over 2 days ago, a new friend. We've been in contact for a lot. We chat a lot online, and we've been in each other's spaces for like 15 years without even realizing it. And I had to brush past him to get something, and I sort of touched his arm, and I was like, ah! I didn't realize how long it had been since I'd sort of brushed past someone.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a, I know that sounds crazy, but it was such a I felt like I was in Standard 7 again, when like Jean Laidlaw was, holding my hand at break, or where you'd take a different route. You'd walk through the quad just so that you could brush past, Tyron or whatever the case may be. And it was as electrifying because, it was rare and new, and it felt different. I mean, that's the other side of the coin.
I think we're only just scratching the surface of this. And also it's too easy now to get, by the time you see someone naked, you should have spent a bit of time with them. Now you just go on OnlyFans.
In my pants.
Right. But now you can go on to OnlyFans, pay whatever the cost of that person's subscription is. And then all your fantasies are already over. There's no build-up. And women like a build-up more than men even. Women like it to be a story. There needs to be like a thing that happens, and then he said this, and then you did that, and then there was a bit of teasing and playing over here, and then there was like a little bit of excitement because he didn't call back immediately, but when he did, it was so much more like fun and interesting.
That's all lost on me.
That's all gone. Like now, you're just, okay, so you look nice. You just like text someone, great tits. And then they send you a picture of their tits. And then you send them a picture of your penis and they go, great cock. And then it's done. Like, so what's left? Where are we now?
Yeah,
I had
that's
a great
it.
sexting session with someone the other day, and it was so beautiful. I was like, wow, what an eloquent person. And it was all like, and she gently, it was all of that shit, like
you could tell them, Nina, I'm not embarrassed if you share that it was me. It's fine.
No, it was great. It was like, that's good. Oh, Gareth, I'd love to sext with you. I think you'd be exceptionally good at it. I'm sure because you're eloquent,
that's like
you've got imagination. You'd be like, well, the carpet was
carpet.
You were like, I walk across the carpet, there was static electricity. As I touched her, there was a spark. You know what I mean? Like walking into the room. Yeah?
I wish that was the case. The funny thing with Nina is like the only time we text each other is she'll find like old footage of herself on the internet and then send it to me and say, look how I'm so fucking funny. And then I'll reply to her and say, yes, you are. And then I'll bump into a friend of hers and send her a picture. But I mean, we don't even talk that often. This sounds like an exciting thing. Listen, we're all looking for distractions in lockdown, right? And even in the post lockdown period now. So if you can have those kinds of sexy or exciting or just really funny conversations with people, it does fill a hole that taking away people's social lives has created.
It fills that hole, but it doesn't fill any others.
You walked into that one, guy. You did.
Yeah, I did. I walked straight into that. So a couple of quick things before we get to Sibulele, who I can't wait to talk to. But we have to, at some point in the next day or two, we have to discuss this Spotify situation. Apparently, they're quietly deleting controversial episodes of Joe Rogan's podcast.
Is that so?
Yeah. Now, Joe Rogan's always been this dude who's like, I'm not afraid. You can't delete me. I'm not going to say my thing. If this is true, I mean, he's taking the money, right? I mean, he's been paid a huge amount of money by Spotify, so maybe he doesn't give a shit. And I don't believe that principle should always come ahead of everything. There are some times where you're like, you know what? Principle can take a nap while I try to make some cash. But if it is true, it does kind of take away from the integrity that he's built up with his audience in terms of being this guy who doesn't get told what to do. He's an alpha male. He's like, I think that if that's true, it's a little bit sad. And also it's pathetic on Spotify's part. Like, so what if something that he said in an episode 20 years ago is now considered beyond the pale? So what? I mean, there's stuff. I'm not going to go back and delete any episodes on cliffcentral.com. You're going to find things that will be unacceptable in a year's time. You will. I'm not even going to delete Nina's old shows, and my God, were those controversial. You remember?
Please delete all my old episodes for the love of God.
You'll never get work again if we let those out.
I will be cancelled not only from the entertainment industry, but I think people will just come and shoot me.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, no, there was a time where there were certain things that I wasn't aware of that could have been hurtful to people. I never want to hurt anyone. I like ridiculing something and ridiculing a system that needs to change itself. So there's a rule in comedy that I only sort of became more aware of as I, built up my chops. But in order to make a joke about something, you need to punch up. So if you're in a position of power in any space or in a position of oppression in any space, so I can say, for example, be on stage and be like, you guys all have tiny cocks, and you're like, oh, but that's harsh against men. However, men are in a position of power in a society space.
That's woke bullshit. I mean, you can punch any way you like. If you're going to be mean, you must take the heat that comes with it, though. And I think there is something funny about making the odd cripple joke or talking about old people, or that's not punching up or down. That's just making fun of humanity. I don't think it's a power thing. I don't listen. There are going to be things that people say that are extremely funny, but that are also politically incorrect. I don't like the fact that there are these people who go and scrub the internet and find like a clip of Nina Hastie from 2014, and they're like, listen to this bitch, she must be cancelled. Just let,
I mean,
you know,
exactly.
and frankly, if someone's hurt, then you can issue a personal apology to them, but do not apologize to people on Twitter or on social media. That's just a road to endless pain, because once they see you are vulnerable, they will never stop giving you shit, ever.
Just to quickly wrap it up, yes, Spotify hasn't released a statement on this yet. Neither has Joe Rogan. But as of some tallies being made by the New York Post, so far more than 42 interviews that Joe Rogan has done have been removed. And some of those include, like, controversial guests. The founder of the Proud Boys in the US, the comedian Chris, is it D'Elia? That's how you pronounce his surname.
Chris D'Elia.
Yeah. He is the one who was accused of grooming underage girls and getting like nude images of underage girls. But yeah, as much as they're keeping quiet on this, Joe Rogan can soldier on. It's part of the $100 million deal. So I don't think it will hurt him much.
Yeah, but it's still, to me, like, who else is going to? So no one can ever interview the Proud Boys again. So how are we ever going to find out what the Proud Boys are and how dangerous they might be if everybody's going to scrub them off the internet? That worries me enormously. Like, if we make the internet a safe space, then how the hell are we ever going to find out where the bad people are and what they think? Because there are genuinely dangerous people in the world. And I'm not saying that it is these Proud Boys guys or whatever. There are dangerous people in the world. And if we're going to make the internet a place where they don't appear at all, we're going to convince a whole lot of people they don't exist. That's more dangerous than if they say the odd thing that's offensive.
Oh, fuck, I wish I had a rebuttal.
Sorry, that's where we're going to end that one. I want to move on to something much more important than Nina and Sia and I just talking nonsense. And it comes to the subject of entrepreneurship. And we've been able to get Sibulele Siko-Shosha to join us, an entrepreneur, founder of the Dumile Group. Hey, Sibulele, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Gareth. How are you? Thank you for pronouncing my name and both my surnames correct.
Well, I try. Occasionally I struggle, but I think it matters, Thank you for that, because, someone will say, like they'll call me Gavin, for example, and I'm like, oh, how could someone do that? That's so rude.
I hate it when people do that.
I've been called many things. I've been called Sibulele Siko-Shosha and Shosholoza, so it's very pleasant.
Shosholoza.
That is laziness. All right, so let's talk about you, because many people may not be aware of your story. You're an entrepreneur, and you've got quite a lot of things to tell us about that journey. But let's start with where so you were born in Cape Town, and did you study there? What did you do in the beginning?
I studied radio broadcasting, actually, and that was inspired from listening to your former show in the former station you were in.
Really?
And then, from studying radio broadcasting, I then went to Wits and studied media and international relations. So, I got both. I started studying in Cape Town and then got my second qualification at Wits University.
So how did you eventually end up in business, and what pulled you to business?
Look, I always tell people that it was not my journey into entrepreneurship was never romanticized. I was just hurtful. I was just so tired. I was just so tired of working for a then company that wasn't aligned with my values. I was so tired of being, oh, look, this is our black friend in the boardroom. And I was dumb enough to have made this decision when I was also 7 months pregnant with my son. So there was no MBA or no thought. It was 100% emotive decision. But here we are now.
And then obviously once you make a decision like that, you have to see it through now, because there's no one else you can rely on, and you need to make it work, right? So there's a bit of pressure.
Yes, because also it was a middle finger to my former bosses, So now you can't now go scrub up your CV and go beg for another boss for another job, because you've already developed a street cred of pulling your middle finger up to bosses. So, like I always tell this story. One of my first pitches was in Joburg, and I actually lied to a certain airline that I was 6 months pregnant instead of telling the truth and saying I was 8.
Wow.
And then when I get to the pitch, it was actually at the midst of load shedding. Yes.
Oh no.
The things I planned in my life. The boardroom was 3 floors up. And I was heavily pregnant. And there was load shedding, and I had to walk up these stairs. Needless to say, as I landed in Cape Town a few hours later, my water broke and I had my son. So basically, moral of the story: don't start businesses when you are pregnant.
That's amazing.
The end. But yeah, look,
Did you at least win? Did you win that pitch? Because then it was worth it. Otherwise,
yes, I did. But the downside of it is that I don't remember the first 6 months of my son's life. Because literally my mom would come to the office, I would express milk, and she would leave. So I'd always hear stories like, he rolled over, and I'm half asleep. I'm like, yeah, great, roll over, man. So
I love how irresponsible you are.
What? So like even I remember I was in Durban doing a shoot when he started walking. My mom is calling, oh my God, Uzi. My son's name's Uzi. Uzi is walking. I'm like, that's great, Mom. Let him walk. So
you have pointed out something that I think is true for a lot of people who think about entrepreneurship, think of starting their own business, and don't realize that you actually need to have a network of support. Like if you don't have someone, if you've got a kid, for example, you don't have someone who can look after that kid, whether it's a domestic worker or helper, whether it's a mom or an aunt or an uncle or a granny, like it makes your life absolutely impossible. You just cannot be a successful entrepreneur if you also have to be a full-time mom, if you also have to be the person who's looking after other children or other people's children or anything else. There's some things that just are not within the ambit of people who are trying to start a new business. And that's true. If you look back, obviously nothing's perfect. Some people manage, some people survive. What did you think when you woke up on the day that you realized, because it might not have happened immediately, when you realized like now suddenly no one is paying me. I have to earn all this money myself. I mean, it's something Nina understands because she's always been reliant on herself in terms of, I mean, like, listen, it's hard, right? It's very, very hard to do this.
True. I've had my own business or worked for myself since 2013. Sorry to cut you off. I appreciate that, and I don't know where that strength comes from, or I guess your sense of necessity. Like, you burnt a bridge. I'm a fan of a burnt bridge, because it forces your hand. So I think maybe you had to just show up for yourself.
I think I was lucky enough. Actually, I'm still lucky enough to have a great support system. As Gareth pointed out, even the decision to start a business, I just rolled over and tapped my husband. I'm like, yo, you're paying for everything, right? I'm not going back. But this was like at 2 a.m. in the morning. So I don't think he thought his answer well, because he was like, rah, 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 and then the next day I didn't go to work. But it gnaws at your independence as a woman, I would say, because now instead of going to go buy those stuff you used to hide because you spent your own money, you need to talk about stuff. I mean, consult. It's the weirdest thing. But also, I started my business in 2008 in the middle of the financial. I was not smart. Actually, thinking about it, I was stupid. It was the middle of a financial crisis.
Yeah.
It was the middle of a financial crisis. I was pregnant. I threw this on my husband, and I'm surprised I'm not divorced. Shit. Okay, so
yeah, you. This is actually turning into a bit of a therapy session. I think there are a bunch of people you should go and apologize to after this interview. We've just woken you up.
Listen, I also love how my whole family embraced me, because literally my late brother quit his job and got into the business with me. My mom became my nanny. My husband reluctantly became my financer, and everyone just believed in this dream that I also didn't believe in, because I don't know what the hell I was doing half the time. But the cool thing was that I was lucky enough. I had Wi-Fi, I had a laptop, like the basics
Sure.
to start a business. And other entrepreneurs don't have that. And I think also that is why, especially within the Black entrepreneurship space, as I was speaking about this yesterday, there's this thing of focusing on the shame narrative. The whole I was born in the dusty.
Everybody wants to hear that. You know what I blame? I blame shows like Idols. I blame these reality shows where the hard luck story is more important than whether or not the person can actually sing. No one in business gives a fisherman's fuck how hard your life has been before you got there. If you have a service or you have a product that can add value to other people's lives, that is all that matters. No one wants to know about what happened to you when your mom died and you were all of 14 years old. No one would help you and blah, blah, blah. It's boring. You can have those conversations at drinks afterwards when you signed the deal.
Yeah, because like the actual narrative is what brings Black entrepreneurs, holds Black entrepreneurs back, because you're not selling, you're not amplifying your USP. You're talking about how you were born in the dusty streets of Kailicha. So what? You know, we all were born in the dusty streets of some township somewhere. So I think one of the things I'd like to focus on as well is helping SMEs and Black businesses tell their stories properly. No one gives a shit that I've got estrogen and melanin. They want to see the value that I bring for their company and their brand in order to, for the relationship to be mutually beneficial. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm tired of seeing these patronizing stories in the news of it. This is the first Black woman to X, Y, and Z. And you're like, well, this is not helping Black people or women, because what you're saying is it's taken this long for this to happen. And you're actually in a perverse sort of way, you're making it excusable for people to keep thinking that is somehow that's inferior to anyone else's work. It's not good. And I think the intention is probably good, but it ends up really hurting those people who are the first X, Y, or Z. It's just not good.
I'd like to actually bring this back into the theme of depression. And this is actually what I discussed with Hanan, who's my cognitive behavioral therapist, yesterday. And he was saying his approach is to not label yourself with a mental health issue or to label yourself as someone with bipolar. We have a bit of a different view on this. And his thing is to say, as soon as you've identified with this thing that is crippling, it takes away your intention for agency to get out of it. So when you are experiencing the sensation of being stuck, when you're in depression, the physiological depression, and you're experiencing the stuck, you don't have an impetus to get out of that situation. You don't have the drive to follow that dangling carrot because you haven't created one for yourself, because you've accepted this thing, this label, this position.
That's 100% right. Listen, I just wanted, before we go, because we've got to get to Blind History, which is a brand new season. It starts today, and I don't want to cut that time short at all. But Sibulele, before we let you go, just tell me about the Dumile Group and what you guys actually do, because we've heard about entrepreneurship generally, but what is it that you actually do?
The Dumile Group is a 360 content generating agency. Our business is split into two. We've got an advertising agency, and we also produce television for broadcasters. We produced one of Cape Town's first drama series in Kailicha called Ngululeko. It was from Zanzi Magic. That was great. Nice. And then we also have an advertising arm to the business where we do your normal run-of-the-mill 360 advertising.
What is? Did you get to say "fu" to your former employers? I mean, did you get that satisfaction? Because that's a nice feeling when you can succeed and they fail.
I think this is also a part. I think that this is also part of my. This is also part of my FU, to be honest. As I said, it's like the little, it's the little wins, the big wins, the publicity that I get, and the opportunity to flourish as a creative. I don't believe in just cutting off the head. You must bleed slowly. So like this is like, hey, go here, fuck you again.
You're a torturer. All right,
Yeah.
listen, I'm afraid, ladies, we're out of time and we've got to get to Blind History. Nina, lovely to have you on. Sibulele, great to meet you, and thank you both for everything that you've added in terms of this morning. It's felt like we haven't had enough time, and we probably haven't, but we'll definitely have you back on, Sibulele. And Nina, always good to see you. Thanks, babe.
Thanks, Gavin. No problem. It's been really great. Thanks. I appreciate it. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Cheers,
Bye.
guys. So let's get to the first episode of season 5 of Blind History, which is really this is something I'm very proud of. Anthony Medera and I enjoy it thoroughly and enormously. We love looking into the stories of these people. We decided we'd start the 5th season with a bad guy, but also a bad guy who was way more multi-dimensional and interesting and complex than the average historical villain or Disney villain. His name is Al Capone, and I don't have to say a whole lot more than that, but he really was the dude who invented the term gangster. He was the real thug. He was the first mafia boss. And before those words became the words that rappers and pretenders and small-time thieves used, this guy was the real deal. He started modern organized crime in America, and he was the most real of them all. Here's Al Capone, Blind History, Season 5, Episode 1. Chicago didn't know what was coming for it when Al Capone arrived, and it's never been the same since. The Tommy guns, the cars, the suits, the fedora hats, the money, and the prohibition booze. Al Capone had everything, and he didn't mind killing people to keep it. The most famous mob boss of them all, he was the gangster gold standard. This is the story of Al Capone, the real Godfather. Alphonse Capone. Scarface is what they called him. Al Capone is probably the most famous gangster in history. And today, he is our focus on Blind History, the brand new season, Season 5. My co-host, as always, Anthony Medera, and it's good to see you. It's been a while. It feels like much longer than it actually has been.
Yeah, and it's great to be here. I get so excited when the new season starts.
Well, I'm excited because people have been hassling me about starting a new season. And I said, well, we've got to have meetings first and decide who we're actually going to talk about and all the rest of it. So we decided to start with a bad guy, which people love. I love the bad guys. This guy is way more interesting than I thought he was, as often happens when we research these guys. But he's not Scarface with Al Pacino. Say hello to my little friend. He's not that, but he's all kinds of other good stuff.
You know, the thing with Al Capone is he was such an enigma. He had such a different side to him. I mean, he was hectic family. He was a family man of the highest order. And so, you know, and he had this conscience that people said when, you know, just before he died, he was talking to all the people he'd killed and trying to ask for forgiveness. And
wow.
So he had a different side to him as well.
Well, we got to start somewhere with Al Capone. I mean, he was the son of immigrant Italian parents. He had about 10 brothers and sisters, and some of them got involved in the business with him later on, right?
Yeah. So you had, I think it was 9. One of them died at age 1, so maybe that was where the 10 came from.
Okay.
But yeah, so a lot of them did come into the business. Some of them got killed during the highest part of his life or his career, as you might want to call it. But his parents weren't down and out. You know, his dad was a barber that came from Naples. His mom was a seamstress, and they had a big family, but generally a happy family. So they weren't broke. They literally came to New York 6 years before he was born. But it's just that where they moved to was rife with petty crime and racketeering.
Sure. I mean, we've seen so many movies about that time in New York.
Yeah.
And of course, it was pre-prohibition at that stage. But
Joseph Kennedy did that. I mean, well, let me rather say allegedly, but
allegedly. The place was still, the quickest way to make money was to do underworld things.
Yeah. But the thing with Al Capone was that he looked to be a promising student. He did well in his grades. And okay, so he left in grade 6, which standard 4, which is quite young. And he was 14, which is maybe a concern.
Yeah, but why did he leave?
Because he smacked his teacher. So he obviously had some anger issues, and his teacher was a lady. So that didn't go down well.
That's not good.
No, I don't think
these days, I don't think that would go down very well either.
So then that was the last of his official education, but you'll see it play out later. He was very good with figures. He tried for a stint when Sonny was born, his only child. He went into a bookkeeping of something. He actually did like a legit
ledger.
Yeah. But for a week
so
or two.
I'm interested. You say his son, Sonny, and I didn't really know about this at all. But Sonny was also the name of, you know, the character in The Godfather's son.
Yeah.
The eldest son who was gunned down famously in the first Godfather movie. And I wonder how much of those movies they did base on Al Capone's life. Because if you look at the caricature of a gangster in Prohibition America, the pinstriped suits, the
fedora,
the hairstyle, the hat, all of that stuff, the way he spoke, it became like the model for all the others. And we've spoken about John Gotti on Blind History before, but really John Gotti was like a much more modern, pale comparison
100%
of what Al Capone was.
Well, John Gotti wouldn't last a month in Capone's time.
No, and of course these guys had the Tommy guns, and you know they would actually take out their enemies in the streets
and the police. They were a different breed.
So how did it all start with Al? Where did he begin in New York?
So he started getting involved in small gangs. So they were young kids running around, and then he actually met his mentor, which is Johnny Torria. And Johnny Torria was part of his life big time until Johnny Torria said he'd had enough and went back to Italy. But
he said he had enough because they tried to shoot him.
Yeah, but this is now they're still in New York, and there's another guy called Frankie Gale, and They really were his mentors. They owned brothels and pubs, bars. And Al was actually quite a strong individual. He was around 6 foot, but strong, like 110 kilograms. So he was a powerful guy, and he started bouncing. That's actually where he got his scar from. He was bouncing the one night actually at Frankie Yale's bar, and this pretty girl came into the bar, and he really took a liking to her. But her brother was hectic, and they just got full of drink, and he kept saying, he kept going there, and she just kept batting him off. So he said in the end, honey, you got a nice ass on you. So the brother had enough. So he came at him, and he took his knife out, and he slashed at Al, and he cut him
on the cheek.
Yeah, right down on the cheek. And he could, if it wasn't for them reacting quickly, he would have died from it.
Now, he never liked being called Scarface.
He hated it. He even said that he got his scar from World War I.
So he was embarrassed about it.
And his whole life, it was he hated Scarface. If somebody called him Scarface,
and he used to never show that side of his face in pictures.
Yeah, but that's where he grew up, and he got involved in some, allegedly as well. He killed 2 people, and the heat started building a bit with him because he was really a larger than life individual already at the age of 16, 18 years old. And so the heat started building, and Johnny Torre had already moved to Chicago, and they think that Johnny needed to get rid of his boss. He was the underboss in the Chicago outfit. And Big Jim, there's always Big Jim, Big Larry, Big whatever.
What these names?
Yeah, so he wanted help, and he needed a hitman like Al. So
he invited him to Chicago.
So he went to Chicago, but I think Al tried to go straight, like I said, for like a day or 2, where he became a bookkeeper. And those numbers, he used to run the numbers. He was very sharp when he finally got up to Chicago.
So when he went to Chicago, I mean, what's interesting here is, first of all, he made one big enemy in his life, and this guy was just obsessed with trying to kill him. And he managed to thwart this. We'll tell the whole story about him in a second, Aiello. But before we get to him, in Chicago, he was primarily involved in brothels, liquor, and racketeering.
Yeah.
Basically saying to people, you need our protection or we're going to burn down your shop.
So the racketeering, 100% protectionism.
Yeah, right.
And getting stuck into politicians. He hated politicians. He said, if you find a good lawman, and that's an honest lawman, you just need to get him moved to another district so he's not in your way.
Yeah.
But he says that
he would do very well in South Africa now.
Very well.
Yeah.
He used to call the politicians swell snakes. So whatever that meant, but
wasn't a compliment.
No, it wasn't a compliment. And he actually had no respect for them. And I think that made it easier for him.
Now, what did he get into this fight with Aiello about? Because this was the guy who he had probably the longest running dispute with.
Yeah, I think it was related to the biggest rivals in Chicago.
Antonio Lombardo. He was made the head of that society, right? And then Joe Aiello, who actually wanted that position, he believed Capone was responsible for this guy getting the position. And that was where it all started.
Yeah.
But this Aiello guy sent, 10, maybe 20 different people in different situations to try and kill El Capone. And every time something saved him. He either found out about it, someone spilled the beans on Aiello's plan. He managed to have someone who was faster and quicker. He just somehow escaped every time. It must have driven this other guy mad.
But what he had to do, though, when that started happening with Aiello, that's when he started having the bodyguards.
Okay.
He always used to say, I don't have weapons on me. Always. I'm a businessman.
Yeah.
And I give people what they want.
That's it.
But he had bodyguards, like proper. And you'd only travel at night. And if he took the train, take out the whole train.
So he booked the entire train.
Yeah. So he had to really protect himself. And I think Johnny Torre couldn't handle it anymore because he was, they were together. So he was the big boss, Johnny, and Al Capone was basically his right-hand man. And the pressure was just too much for Johnny. So, there's some reports say he went to jail and then went to Italy, and some reports say he just went to Italy. Because they took him out, he went to hospital. And when he was in his hospital bed, he said, Al, you take all of it.
Didn't want it anymore.
Yeah, so it was a lot of pressure. But what Al tried to do is he needed to get control of Chicago. So he took out, there was a gang, the North Side Gang.
Yes.
And Stiano Banyang was the one that was running it. But he also loved flowers, this guy. So he was a genuine gangster.
Who loved flowers.
Yeah, and he got murdered while he was trimming his chrysanthemums or something.
This is such a movie scene.
Yeah, and if genuinely he was murdered in his flower shop. And there was a subsequent one of his sidekicks were murdered outside the flower shop. They actually called it the flower shop.
Wow.
And obviously they became more sophisticated. So Johnny Torrio really started making gangland more sophisticated. You had to have a front, so you didn't,
But I mean, Chicago at this stage, and kind of forevermore, because Chicago is still seen as a gangster city. It's still, there's an underworld there, and the police and the media and the crooks all are kind of in cahoots at some point. But that all started with Al Capone. What was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre? Because that was where public love for him turned into public hatred for him.
If I can just go a step back, because it already started, these names started turning, where the people didn't love him so much was when he beat up the editor of the newspaper in Chicago.
Okay.
And that frustrated him so much. And then it escalated to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. But what happened with this individual, his surname was St. John. And you'd get these people in the world that said, no, I'm going to stand up against crime, people like Al Capone. And so he stood up against him to such an extent that his brothel was burnt down. He was very upset when his brothel was burnt down. And so he
wouldn't you be?
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, so he decided to teach him a lesson. So that he beat him up to the inch of his life.
Oof.
But there were cops around that didn't do anything. So this guy went into a ball screaming, and he was in hospital for 2 weeks. And then when he on his way out, somebody paid his bill. And they thought that somebody that was,
family or friend.
Yeah, or, and also sympathetic to people standing up against Capone. And it was Capone that paid his bill.
He paid the bill, huh?
He paid the bill.
For the damage he'd inflicted.
Exactly. But he said, I don't care. I'm going to go after Capone. So he went after him still. So then the cops, he went to the cops, you need to do something. So the cops said to him, come in tomorrow morning and we're going to discuss how we're going to get Capone. They came in, he went into a private room, and who was sitting there with his fedora hat?
Al Capone.
He was sitting there on his own. He took out hundreds of thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollar bills. And St. John said, I'm still not. So Capone, this was really upstanding. So he just bought the newspaper and they got rid of the editor. But so much had been written about Al Capone that the tide had turned.
Yeah.
And so people started seeing him as this murderer and a thug.
But I mean, he wasn't the murderer himself, but he ordered the killings.
Correct.
Or there is the story of him with a baseball bat smashing into people's heads.
Yeah.
Which some people say is true, some people say isn't. But either way, it added to the infamy of his name. And the St. Valentine's Day Massacre was just a step too far. They just killed too many people on one day.
Correct. And they lined them up on a wall.
Yeah, I mean, they pretended to be cops.
Yeah.
It was all very, very ugly. And I think probably even the most, let's say the kind of people who are charmed by gangsters. And we've all watched these movies. And some of these gangsters are very alluring personalities, right? And Al Capone was probably the biggest personality in Chicago of that time.
Or in America.
Sure, maybe in America. And even that was not enough to save him at that point. And he had to also spend a lot of time running between Florida, Tennessee, Texas. He'd be all over the country because he was becoming paranoid too. He thought there were probably a lot of people who were trying to kill him. And he had good reason to think that.
Yeah. You know that he would say that if a cat falls out the tree, if somebody gets killed in a car accident, it's Capone did it. And then he'd also say, if somebody was killed in the World War, get Capone. Get Capone. That's all everybody ever said. He said it. He said, everybody just wants to get me for anything that goes wrong in this world.
So how did they eventually get him? It was tax
evasion. So there was a prosecutor, the hangman prosecutor, who was also trying to get Capone. And he was shot by mistake by Capone's crew. And then the heat just got too much. He had to leave town, and then they started catching him.
But they did arrest him a few times
for vagrancy.
Yeah, really
carrying a gun.
Stupid charges that didn't give him a long time in jail, or most of them he could shirk off.
But they started finding slips of paper that didn't add up in terms of the tax. Then they turned his bookkeepers against him, and he went down. Yeah, he ran out of tricks. You could see from about 1930 onwards, it just got worse and worse. And there were some individuals that became famous for that took him down.
Elliot Ness.
Agreed. You saw that in the movie The Untouchables.
Correct.
So that was a big part of these young guys that were incorruptible.
Now, I didn't know this, but he actually ended up in Alcatraz, which was new. It was newly built. And he was one of the prisoners in Alcatraz. He was also in the band while he was in prison. He played the banjo, I think.
Yeah, he was.
And he loved jazz music. He used to protect jazz singers when they came to Chicago. He'd give them bodyguards, make sure that they could stay in the best hotels, all of that kind of thing. So he did have a little bit of culture in him.
He was immaculately dressed, always pinstripe suits, polished shoes, hat, and he treated his wife absolute gold. Look, he got syphilis from showgirls, prostitutes, but she never saw that as a problem because she knew that it didn't impact on the family. But what was quite sad, this part of his life was quite sad for me.
I found it very sad because I didn't even know that he actually died at home. I thought that somehow he died in prison, but he was eventually released because he'd started to lose it. I mean, by the time he died, they say he had the mental capacity of like a 12-year-old. But he had this syphilis, which was a neurosyphilis, so it had started to make his brain kind of fall apart. And he went back to, ultimately, he went to some asylum where they kind of tried to treat him. And he was one of the first people in the world to receive penicillin at that point, which I think was quite revolutionary. But of course, the disease had spread so far that they couldn't really save him. And he went to stay in Florida, in Palm Beach, for the last few years of his life.
So he bought that massive estate in Palm Beach, and at the height of his career, they say it was worth $100 million. If you can imagine $100 million in 1920.
It's a lot of money.
And you know that supposedly Joseph Kennedy made huge money out of bootlegging, and a lot of people made massive amounts of money. If you can just look at our current situation under COVID, and you look at cigarettes and you start seeing all the sidelines that start popping up and alcohol. So he made a lot of money. So when they put him away, they put him in a normal penitentiary, and he took over. He apparently had a carpeted cell. You could watch,
I saw a picture of his cell. He had lamps on tables. He had a little writing bureau. He had paintings.
Everything. He had everything under control because obviously he had to pay the tax man $50,000 fine. It was a joke to him. So he had a lot of money. But then what they said, no, this can't work. So they sent him to this new prison. It used to be a military base that was run precisionally. They didn't care who you were. So Al Capone had a strategy at Alcatraz. Stay out of trouble, get out in good behavior. And ultimately, he did leave after 6 years. He got out in good behavior.
But he did have someone to protect him in there as well. There was one of the other gangsters who'd worked with him.
But he got badly hurt in the laundry when he had to do laundry duty. They nearly killed him. He spent so much time in hospital. And what they did in Alcatraz, they don't care. Both people that are fighting, they put you in the hole. And he was put in the hole, and that broke his spirit. Al Capone's spirit was broken in the hole. And that was sad to see. So this guy, like I said, 6 foot, 130 kilograms at that stage, biggest gangster America had ever known. They put him in a hole. He was finished. He spent a week in this black hole, and he didn't really recover from that. And then mentally started going sideways with the syphilis. So they let him out after 6 years, but straight into a hospital, like an asylum.
The one hospital actually turned him away because they said, he's too infamous. We can't handle that. We don't want him in our ward.
So the last 7 or 8 years of his life was quite stable. And he was in Florida, and his grandchildren, so Sonny had 4 daughters, and he loved his granddaughters, and he spent the last 7 years of his life such a special time. And the FBI just said, it's another family occasion for the Capones, another this for the Capones. He was doing nothing. I mean, his brother said to him, let's go back to Chicago. Then he got excited, but his brain was cooked.
Yeah.
So,
well, ironically, the Chicago criminal underworld continued pretty much as it had been without Al Capone. In fact, they probably even grew their share of the market.
Correct.
But they weren't attracting as much attention, which was all the politicians were really after. And he lived large. I mean, didn't he also have his nasal septum was ruined from cocaine?
Could have been, yeah. 100%.
Yeah, and he drank heavily.
Yeah.
And of course, the syphilis didn't help. So some of it's inevitable.
Yeah.
You kind of would have expected it. But what a life. I mean, really, the guy lived large. He was the prototype gangster. There's no one who comes close.
And what he did was he should lock up all areas. So when he got a lot of heat out of Chicago, he moved to Cicero, which was a town just down the road. But when you talk about voter intimidation that we often see in Africa and that, some of the governments, if they didn't want to vote for his crew, they'd murder or kidnap them. He would kill the guys. Fear and intimidation was what he was about.
Incredible. You gave that the quote earlier on. He said, I'm just a businessman. I give people what they want.
Exactly.
It's probably the most famous thing he said. Al Capone, a gangster, proper gangster. Don't believe these modern day also rands. This guy was the real deal. Blind History is brought to you by Taylor Blinds and Shutters. All the episodes are available on the cliffcentral.com website and app, as well as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.